Today on Folks, we'll take a look at adoption and the Black family as two couples share their personal experiences with adoption. Also, the first pause for pride, our salute to Black History Month, with a fascinating profile of visual artist William Tolliver of Lafayette, all on today's edition of Folks. Hello everyone, I'm Sonya Masingale and welcome to another edition of Folks. Did you know that there are about 3 couples for every white infant available for adoption? The demand for blue-eyed, blonde, male infants far exceeds the supply in America, yet hundreds of thousands of Black children go unadopted and unloved in adoption centers throughout the United States. Some claim that the future of Black America lies in its children and the strength of its families. Later in the show, we'll talk to 2 adoption professionals who will discuss some of the problems that they're having placing Black children with adoptive parents. But first, a visit with 2 couples who allowed us into their homes and shared with us how adoption improved the quality of their lives. Bonita and Louis Atkins were married 10 years before adopting their son, Ronnie. The 2-career couple felt there was something vital missing from their family life, but it took time for Bonita to persuade Louis to consider adoption.
It was my wife, Bonita's idea. She generated the idea quite some years ago, and I was somewhat reluctant to accept her ideas at that time. And she did quite a selling pitch and put it on the back burners in the home area. And when we actually made up our minds, I'm the one that actually brought it up and said, let's think about it again. And the very next morning, I found out we had an appointment with the Catholic Social Services.
The Atkins found parenting Ronnie such a positive experience that they soon initiated the adoption of their second child, Crystal.
I'm the only child. My mother was the only child. And I always said that if I ever had one, I was going to have 2, without a doubt. I mean, there was no question in my mind. So when we got Ronnie and really enjoyed in about 2 years, when he was about 2.5 years old, I knew I wanted another one. So since I had a boy, then I said, well, a perfect family would be a little girl. And it all kind of worked out.
Stephanie and Phillip Robinson had only been married for a short time before they began considering adoption. In their case, it was Phillip who brought it up to his wife, Stephanie.
I have talked to several fellows at work that have adopted children, and when they had told me about the changes they had to go through with them, it was a long procedure. But then they also said it was worth the while, you know, and how much joy and happiness and all had brought it to their family. So we already had a lot of happiness and love among the 2 of us, so I said, well, another little additional bundle of joy would be just what we need.
It's a very easy process. I think a lot of people are misinformed about the process. They have been discouraged because persons have told them the time frame. For us, it was a different story. We started the procedures in July, and within 2 months, July, August, well, the 3rd month, we had our daughter.
The Atkins also found the waiting period for both children to be much shorter than anticipated, and the experience of bonding with each child as profound as that of many birth parents.
The process was very, I say, simple and educating at that time, because I had not been introduced to the formal process of adoption, and I had a lot of myth I had to destroy in my mind, you know, just different things that I thought social workers would do, and the whole process calls for. But the whole process lasted only about, from the day that we actually arrived at, on the steps of the Catholic Social Services until the day we got Ronnie. It was about 2.5 months or so.
They called us in to show us a picture, and we kind of hashed it around for a day or two, I believe, and I went in, I made an appointment to actually see the baby. And when I saw him, I knew right then, you know, oh, that's my son.
Stephanie found her lifestyle suddenly changed, but Phillip, who has a son from a former marriage, helped to make the transition easier.
The old get up and go changed. It was no more everyone for themselves. We had a child that we had to share responsibilities, which Phillip has been real supportive, and he's carrying his load and more. He'll come in and assist in, you know, in the housework, whatever. He would work with the child, Angel rather. And as far as changes, that was the most, you know, the real big one. You know, just not anymore the two of us. It was three at home now.
In a way, it brought us a little closer. It would open up more doors of responsibility. And we kind of look out after one another, because it's a job, another job that we have to handle once we get in. And there's times that she's a little exhausted. So I try to play both roles of both as well as I can.
When she's a little bit older, will you tell Angel about her adoption?
Well, at the rate Angel's going, I think we will be sitting down telling her before she's 6, you know. I've kept all the material, you know, to let her know that we're not her biological parents, but, you know, we have given her as much love and support as parents can give, and we have promised and vowed to lead her to our best of our ability, but yes, we plan to tell her. I've also asked and requested that her record, once she's old enough, if she would inquire into it, that she would be given the information that they do release by the diocese.
Both couples also experienced unreserved support from their own families.
I kind of wondered how they would accept it, you know, and how they would react to it. And I was just pleasantly amazed when we brought Ronnie home. That first day we brought him home for good, we went to their house, and I couldn't even get out the car good. My father was at the car, just swept him up, took him up to the house, you know, and just played with him. I mean, that family tie was just there, you know, there was no doubt. My mother, well, she was just ecstatic. I knew I wasn't going to have, any problems with her per se, but I just didn't know how my father was going to react. And then later on when I realized, well, gosh, she was adopted, you know, so it's no big thing to him either. But I still didn't let that bother me, you know, as far as my plans was concerned about what I wanted to do.
How did your son react to having a new baby sister?
Oh, he's crazy about her. When he first saw her, they both looked at one another and just broke out laughing. And he wanted to feed her. He wanted her to sleep in the bed with him, you know. He wanted to take over. But she was 3 months old. We let him do a few things, but we watched him closely, you know.
Don't forget the part, excuse me if I may inject. He said, "Mommy, she looks like me and Daddy."
Finally, both couples found the adoption procedure simple and reassuring. They recommend adoption highly to other couples.
I can remember the first day that it came in, I guess I had spent the last 2 days, all day long cleaning up and getting everything perfect. I wanted everything to be perfect because we had made up our mind. We sat at that table back there for about an hour and a half, and we discussed all the things and really got to know each other real well. And she said, okay, that's fine. And she said, well, I'll be back in maybe 2 weeks or 3, and we'll set up another appointment. But the next one would be one-on-one. She wanted me to meet her. I said, you're not going to look around the house and underneath the bedspreads for dirt? Say, no, that's just a myth. I said, well, no, it isn't, because I spent 2 days around here cleaning up. You're going to see this house if you care to or not. So I politely guided her and gave her a tour of the home.
I thought they were going to go way back from many years ago. But it was surprisingly, you know, I felt they did a very efficient job. I didn't really have any doubts about the two of us. And I was a little spooked at first because I wasn't quite aware also about the time that may have been involved.
Would you consider adopting another child?
Yes, my husband is considering it right now, but I'm considering later. I would like Angel to be another year older so she could be a little bit more help to Mommy and her little sister or brother. But yes, we plan to adopt at least 1 or 2 more.
I'm ready. Yes. I guess I have some of the old-fashioned ways. I enjoy children, and I figure, well, we're gonna get in. She's gonna get old soon, and I'm gonna need some help to take care of her. And the more children we have, the better off I'll be.
Very good, baby.
What advice would you give to couples that are thinking about adopting but hesitating?
I'll guarantee you any infant or adopted child will give you a lot more love than you can even offer that child. You get a lot more in return.
I would like to say to anyone who's thinking about adopting to go ahead, find out the revenues and the procedures necessary, and also not giving a pitch for Catholic Diocese, but they worked well with us. And it was the first agency we worked with, and we sent in an application, and within 3 months, like I said, we had our child. So if it's your dream to have a child and you find problems in being, becoming pregnant or what have you, or if you're a single parent, they work with single parents, go ahead and pursue your dream or pursue, you want that child, go for that child.
As you can see, both the Robinsons and the Atkins have strong, happy family units and wonderful children. But why aren't more blacks adopting children? Here to take a look at some of the problems in placing black children in adoptive homes is Janice Sapp, social worker and director of counseling, maternity, and adoptions for Catholic Community Services, and Patsy Scott, director of One Church, One Family, and adoption coordinator for the Department of Health and Human Resources. Welcome to Folks. Patsy, just about 2 years ago, before I joined the Folks staff, we did the introduction of One Church, One Family to the Baton Rouge area. Can you give us an update on what's happening with that program?
Since that time, we've expanded. I think at the time that the interview was done, we were in 2 regions, and later on, the 2 regions that we started working in were Alexandria and Lafayette. Now the One Church, One Family is also in New Orleans as well as the Monroe region. And right now, we've recently applied for a grant from the federal government, which will allow us to have some funding to utilize volunteers to get more help with the program. And that the reason we want to use volunteers is because we feel that there are a lot of myths about blacks as in the area of adoption, which is why some people don't come forth and adopt, because they're not really aware sometimes that you can be single and adopt, you can be a working parent and adopt. So there are a lot of myths that we're trying to erase.
Yeah, I talked with both of the couples, and both couples, each partner said the same thing. Lack of knowledge is what they thought was keeping most black people from adopting, but I'm not so sure. We'll get into that a little bit later. Janice, what are things like at the Catholic Community Services now?
The reason that you had already mentioned, the lack of knowledge that black couples have about adopting through a licensed agency, and for our agency, a lot of black couples may not realize they don't have to be Catholic to apply to adopt. We're an ecumenical agency.
Okay, well, how many children are available for adoption at Catholic Community Services?
We try to place the children within the first month that they come into foster care in their permanent family. They're in a foster home for a 2-week period of time while the birth mother makes the decision whether to place her child for adoption or to parent.
But how many children are there available for adoption?
That kind of information is confidential.
Okay, so you can't tell us how many. Well, how many black families do you have on your roster?
We don't have any approved black families at this time. The reason being that as soon as we approve a family, we place a child almost immediately for adoption. When we don't have approved black family for an infant, we network with other agencies throughout the state to try to place the child.
Including DHHR?
Including DHHR.
Okay, well, Patsy, approximately how many black children are there available in the state right now for adoption?
There's 744 children available for adoption in Louisiana right now. 58% of those children are black. One of the things you have to understand is that we have a larger number of children that are available because the children that enter care come to adoption because they've come through the child protection part of the system. That is to say, they've been abused and are neglected. And usually there are between 5,500 and 6,000 children that are in foster care, and usually between 700 and 800 of those children tend to be available for adoption. We are a special needs adoption program. That is to say, most of our children who are available are older children, sibling groups, and children with special needs. So most blacks who apply to adopt through our agency tend to want the younger children, and they get placed with fairly easily because in many instances, if they don't get an infant or a preschooler, sometimes if they wait a little longer, a private agency or some other agency would probably be interested in placing with them. But we do have a need for people who are interested in adopting older children.
Well, obviously, that's a lot of
Well,
children.
Even if they're interested in younger children, we can use anybody that are interested because we try to make placements based on the best interests of the child. So it's good to have a waiting list even.
I see. Janice, in your opinion, why are black couples or singles even so reluctant to adopt children?
I think the main reason is lack of knowledge that we exist. And I think in the black community there's a strong informal adoption network that in the past families have tended to adopt the child in the extended family system, and that it doesn't occur to families to apply to an agency to go through the home study process to adopt. And that's the main reason we're trying to reach out, change some of that.
Well, both families said that the investigation or whatever was relatively painless. Could you go kind of step by step briefly through what a home study means?
It's a mutual exploration between the caseworker and the family as to what type of child would fit into their home. It's an assessment as to the marital stability, emotional stability of the couple. We're not looking for families that are exceedingly wealthy, but rather looking at families that manage their money well and can adequately provide for a child. We're looking for good values, good family-oriented values. Most folks would fit that description. And it's not an investigation, I'm sure, as the couple's told you, but rather helping them to look at what adoption means to them, what it's all about. And the main criteria, I think, is being able to accept and love a child that was not born to you, has a different genetic background, a different heritage, and coming to terms with that. And this is what the social worker helps the families to decide if this is for them or not.
Well, speaking of different heritage, I'm curious about interracial adoption. What's going on in the state as far as interracial adoption?
As far as the state is concerned, we make placements based on the best interests of the child. So that's kind of open there, but basically that's what we do. Placements are made on a case-by-case basis.
What does that mean, though?
That means that if we have 5 applicants and they all want a 5 or 6-year-old, then we look at that child's background, we look at how long that child has been in foster care, what type of homes he's been in, what type of family he's with now. All those things are taken into consideration. So it's not like we place with the first family that comes along, which is why we try in most instances to have more than one family available for one particular child. And one of the things that most people don't realize is that placing older children and children with special needs is that these children have a past, and that becomes a part of their present and a part of their future. So we look at all those things in making a decision. And another thing that plays an important role as far as the state is concerned is that over 50% of our adoptions are made by foster parents. So that takes
That's really
into
interesting. But you kind of skirted the issue, and I'm going to put you on the hot seat. What is the state policy on interracial adoptions?
Placing in the best interest of the child. And when you're looking at the best interest of the child, you have to look at the child's background, the culture, all of that. So that would really...
So have there been interracial adoptions in the past?
In very few instances. In most instances that I'm aware of, the children that were placed were children what are called biracial. That is to say, a white parent and a black parent. And in those...
with biracial couples or with biracial children?
Okay, the biracial children were placed in, say, with a white couple, and those instances are very few that I'm aware of. I don't know about with your agency.
We place biracial children with a biracial couple. We also match the best family for the child, take the child's best interest is the primary concern. And to my knowledge, since our agency since our agency began in 1964, we have always placed black children in black families and biracial children in biracial families.
What about open adoption? I've heard this phrase. I don't really know what it means.
We like to call it individualized adoption planning at our agency.
What does it mean?
What it means is that the birth parent and the adoptive parents work out, in a sense, their adoption plan for the child. In terms of the amount of contact, we're talking about non-identifying information exchange. In some instances, the birth parent does meet with the adoptive parent after she has legally released the child for adoption. One time, first name basis only meeting. And they work out at that point how often they want to be in contact through the exchange of gifts or letters, or through the agency. The exchange goes through the social worker at the agency, and it remains non-identifying.
Okay, does the state also utilize that kind of openness?
We're prohibited by law. Most adoptions or closed adoptions, because of Louisiana law, we're not at liberty to give out any identifying information to the adoptive parents. But one thing is, we're a little different because in many instances we're placing an older child. And with older children who've been in foster care, they know their parents have had visiting rights. So they know where their parents are, who their parents are, and that kind of thing. And while they were in foster care, they may have visited. Sometimes if they're not aware, they have an older sister or older brother or sibling that is aware of where the parents are and that kind of thing. So it's a little different. But when we do place an infant or a younger child, it's usually a closed adoption. And like,
The majority of your placements are infants or older children?
the majority of our placements are older children, sibling groups.
I see. And this is fascinating. What, Janice, what would you advise parents who are, or potential parents who are thinking about adopting but hesitating?
I think that the best thing is to call either agency and find out more information about the type of infants or children available for adoption, and get on a waiting list if possible to have a home study done.
Okay. And right now, I'd like to add that there's probably some numbers at the bottom of the screen for more information about either of these programs. You could call Catholic Community Services at 927-4930. For more information on adoptions, 925-4532, and the One Church, One Family program at 342-4040. And what kind of advice would you give to people who are interested but really don't know a whole lot about it?
I would tell them to call, because if you're interested in something, the only way you can really find out is if you call for the information. I think in many instances people screen themselves out because they don't call. And a lot of the myths that are there in the community are not really true. Until you really apply, you won't know. Because I remember when I was working in the Lake Charles office a long time ago, I had one lady to come in and we did a home study, and she indicated, well, when do I get the blood test? And I said, what blood test? She said, well, I was told that I had to have a blood test to adopt. And I think that certainly there's so many myths out there. Just call, because years ago we did not certify people to be foster parents if they were working outside of the home. There are a lot of things that have changed, so just give us a call.
Thank you so much. We've been talking to Janice Sapp of the Catholic Community Services and Patsy Scott of the Department of Health and Human Resources about Black families and adoptions. If you're like most people, you may not know much about art, but you know what you like. And many people throughout the nation are discovering that they like the paintings and sculpture of a young Black artist now residing in Lafayette, Louisiana. In fact, his work is so well liked that the gallery handling his work is moving his paintings, which sell for prices upwards of $4,000, often before the paint is dry on the canvas. Today's Pause for Pride, William Tolliver, was born and reared in Vicksburg, Mississippi by parents of humble means. He has little formal education and no formal art training, but the scope of his work is being compared to the great masters of art such as Van Gogh, Picasso, and Jacob Lawrence. We visited Mr. Tolliver at his studio in Lafayette, where he told us how he began to paint.
Well, I got started drawing. It all still is. I started drawing first when I was 4 or 5 years old. My mother draws a little, and my brother used to draw. He don't draw very much anymore. And we would have drawing contests at home. And this was a form of entertainment. And basically, it stemmed from that. I got interested in it, and I kind of got hooked at a young age, you know. And as I got older, 9 or 10 years old, I started going to the library and found out they had art books, you know. And I started reading art books and copying the pictures and stuff in there. And basically, that kind of kindled my interest, you know. And I found out about oil paints and stuff through reading books. And I went and bought this paint by number set for the oil paints in it, you know. And I found out how the colors went together, you know, through using those paint by number sets.
Tolliver's work has come a long way from paint by number sets. This is the Tolliver collection at Crutchfield's Live Oak Gallery in Lafayette, where Tolliver first began to sell his artwork regularly while he was in between jobs as a house painter.
It was a dream, but that's all it was. I never thought it would materialize. So you had people who had colleges, everybody I read about had a lot of critics behind their name. You know, they had all kinds of master's degrees, and they went to this college for so many years and that college for so many years, you know. And this is all you read about when you see an artist in a book or a magazine. And I had none of that, you know. So I figured, you know, the odds were about 1,000 to none, you know. It was an impossibility.
Tolliver's themes often depict scenes from his childhood in Mississippi. He combines realism and the abstract to create what he calls representative abstracts.
So a lot of times you look at a canvas and they give you a certain feeling. Well, this is what I want to be able to do, is to give people a feeling of serenity, security, you know, all that I'm painting. You know, I thought that would be a great achievement if you could take paint and canvas and turn nothing into something like that, you know. There's a lot of protest art, and you know, around there's a lot of things that has a negative connotation about them, and well, that's all right. They can do that, but mine is basically consists of something that's positive. You know, people working with pride and dignity. You know, the people I grew up with, they pick, you know, a lot of them picked cotton. They worked in the fields. But I didn't see the negative image that had been projected by a lot of painters when they paint those type of pictures. You know? And when I looked at these negative type of pictures, it showed, you know, picking cotton as something to be ashamed of, you know. And these were my people, you know. I mean, my grandmother, my mother, you know. I grew up with people that's doing that kind of work, you know. Should I be ashamed of them, you know? I didn't feel like I should, you know. So I intentionally started painting cotton field scenes and showing them in a positive sense, showing them as people rather than as something to be ashamed of, because this is a part of our heritage, you know, and without those people, most of us wouldn't be around, you know.
Well, that's it for this week's show. Be sure to join us next week for another edition of Folks. Bye-bye.